What's up guys, in this video we're going to be going over different types of camera views in Roblox Studio. So the first camera view that we're going to be going over today is super simple to use and create. All that you're going to do is go over to starter player right here. It should be a nice looking folder right there. When you click on this, you can go down into the properties, scroll down to where it says camera mode, and then turn that on to lock first person. Now when we do this and click on play, you should see that the camera will be locked into a first person point of view, and you can see I cannot scroll out of here, which is perfect for what we want. That one is super simple. However, there are a few other camera types that we can make inside of Roblox Studio. This one is going to be a side scrolling camera, or basically one that will look the player at their side, and it's mainly used for such as platformers or 2D games, which can be pretty cool if you ask me. So let's go right over that. What you're going to go ahead and do is click on starter player once again, but we're going to click on the little triangle to the left of that to open it up. Go down into starter character scripts, click on the plus icon to the right of that, and then add in a local script, just like that. Let me zoom in a little bit right here. So now let's get scripting. So first off, my bad, we need to set the starter character scripts into starter player scripts. I forgot about that. However, we can get scripting one more time inside of here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is get our player service for first, or say local players will be equal to game get service players, just like this. Now local player will be equal to players.local player. So I've got our players and our local player inside of here. So we're basically going to take this player apart into variables. So local character will be equal to player.character. Now let's go ahead and get their character's humanoid root parts. I'm going to say local humanoid root part will be equal to character find first child humanoid root part with a capital H, R, and P. They're very important that you capitalize those. Now we're going to make two constant variables which will never change inside of our script. We're going to capitalize them to make sure that we don't change them. The first one that we're going to call is called height, and then underscore offset, just like this. And this will be equal to something like 2. You can change this as much as you'd like to. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and do 4. Just to see what this will do. Now let's go ahead and make another one for our camera depth, just like this. This will be equal to something bigger than the other one, so let's go ahead and do 30 or something like this. Now let's go ahead and create a local function, just like this. I'm going to name this to camera, and let's go ahead and get scripting. We already have our character variable right up here, so let's go ahead and say if it is our character, then we can go ahead and grab the humanoid root part position. So we're going to grab local humanoid root part position. Actually, let's shorten this down. Let's just say you can either do HRP position, or you can just do root position. Lots of people choose to do different things. I'm just going to do root position because it's simpler and it eliminates the use for abbreviations while still having the same meaning. So our root position will be equal to our humanoid root part dot position plus vector3.new 0 on the x-axis, and then we're gonna put our height offset for the y-axis, and then a comma for there, and then we're gonna go ahead and put another 0 on the z-axis. Now we need to create another variable for our camera's position. So we're going to say local camera position, just like this, will be equal to vector3.new. We're going to grab our root position right here for the x-axis, and then we're going to do .x, and then we're going to grab our root position right here .y for the y-axis, and then our camera depth right there for the z-axis. Now all we need to do, go ahead and get our camera. So let's go ahead and create another variable up here for our camera, which will be equal to workspace.current camera, just like that. Now we set our camera.cframe. So our camera.cframe will be equal to cframe.lookAt, and this will be our camera position. So this will be our script that will basically run, well, we need to make it run in a second here, but this is our function that will update the camera's position and constantly have it focused on the player's humanoid root part. Now in order to actually sync this function up to whenever our player moves, we're going to be using run service. So right up here at the top, I'm just going to create a new line, and let's say local run service will be equal to game get service run service, just like this. Now down here at the bottom, we can grab our run service, tell it to bind this function to our render step. Well, not a function, but we're basically gonna bind a side scrolling camera, just like here. It's important that you spell it exactly as it is right here. Then after here, we're gonna put a comma for enum.renderPriority.camera.value +1, and then we're gonna call our camera function just right here. Make sure you get rid of any parentheses in case it puts it there for you. And this is basically our script right here. Our script in its entirety, basically. Let's just run over what a few of these things do. So basically, run service.renderStepped runs every time a new frame is rendered on the client's device. So let's say someone has like 60 FPS or frames per second. Then this camera function is gonna update 60 times every second. So it's constantly gonna be on the player no matter what happens. Now this player's service right here is getting our player's service right here. The player right here is getting any local player from our player's service. This variable is getting the character from our player. This is the humanoid root part from our character. And this is the workspace's camera. These are two constant variables that we use to determine the height and camera depth and offset of our camera right down here. And this function right here will basically just update our camera's C-frame to constantly look at the player's humanoid root part. Now once again, we're just running this function whenever every time that our game updates every frame, just like that. Alright, this was my bad. Instead of saying find first child, we need to wait for child. I forgot that this script is going to be running as soon as the player joins the game, not necessarily the character. The player will join in before the actual character does, so we need to make sure that we're waiting for the humanoid root part before we can actually go ahead and get it. Alright, so these are running too quickly. I'm going to grab this humanoid root part down here, and I'm just going to basically paste it right above here inside of our if character then, and then this character I'm just gonna put inside of this function just like that. Once again, I had another error right here. I have a capital C in my function but a lowercase c in my code. One thing to always remember, people, debugging is a process of any development and is something that every developer goes through. So if your code doesn't work the first few times, don't get frustrated. It's a normal process and it definitely happens. After fixing that mistake, you can see that my camera is now in a side view just like this. So that was the second camera view that we have for our players. Let's go ahead and get into our third and final camera view that we can have for a player inside of Roblox Studio. So for this third and final camera view, we'll basically be using some of the same variables as before, but we're going to change them up slightly. Now this third camera view, it's an isometric camera view, which we'll get into later when I explain whatever is going on. So really the only thing that we'll be changing here is this function right here. We can keep everything right above it. I'm just going to add an extra check right here. If it is our humanoid root part, then we can go ahead and do this to make sure that the character is constantly loaded in, and we can just cut all this and paste it right into here. Now the few changes that we're going to make are going to basically just revolve around line 16 or this line right here. So our local camera position, instead of equaling to vector3.new with all these axes and everything inside of there, we're basically going to take our root position plus vector3.new, and then this will be camera depth for the X, camera depth for the Y, and camera depth for the Z instead of just the other ones, and camera depth for the Z. Camera depth will be on all the axes just like this. So that's the only change that we have to make to this function right here. Now down here we do need to change this from a side-scrolling camera to what is called an isometric camera, just like this. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. As you can see when I join in, this camera is basically fixed at an angle looking slightly downwards at our player right here. Now, of course, you can change these settings inside of our script. Let me stop the game real quick. So yeah, going down to a height offset of something like 2, maybe even 15 for the camera depth. Things like this, just adjusting these two constant variables can really improve or mess up your game. So make sure you like and find the right camera angle that works for you. Anyways, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment down below if you learned from this. Goodbye.